It was a quiet evening on the spaceship that served as an intergalactic academy for both humans and aliens. The corridors hummed softly with the sound of engines and the occasional chatter of students, each from different corners of the galaxy, pursuing knowledge. Ethan, a human student, was finishing his last assignment in his room, a small personal space he had customized to reflect his humble life back on Earth. He had spent the entire day in class, learning about the many species that lived across the stars and how they interacted with one another. But today, something felt different. Ethan wasn't a typical student. He was curious about things most humans weren't, especially when it came to the biology of other species. His peers often found him strange for spending his free time studying alien genetics and researching potential ways humans could adapt to different environments. It wasn't that he was a loner. It was just that the humans around him didn't share his passion for learning. Today, after a class about alien history, Ethan had decided to stay in his room to finish his project, a bio-research assignment, focused on the effects of human-alien hybridization. He wasn't trying to create hybrids, of course, but the idea of blending human biology with alien traits was something that fascinated him. He had already made small progress by studying DNA from different alien species. It was just a hobby of his, something he didn't tell many people about. The idea of altering humanity's biology in a positive way, however, intrigued him. Maybe, one day, humans could live in space without the need for special equipment. Maybe they could even become stronger, faster, more adaptable, just like the aliens they shared the stars with. As he worked, the door chime of his room rang. Ethan was startled. It was rare that anyone visited him here. His classmates knew he preferred to keep to himself, always absorbed in his work. He didn't mind. The soft beeping of the door chime interrupted his concentration. Who could it be? He wondered. He walked over to the door, slightly confused but curious. As he opened it, he found himself face to face with someone he never expected. Zara stood there, her purple skin almost glowing under the artificial lights of the corridor. She was one of the top students at the academy, a member of the Veshri species, a race of tall, slender aliens known for their intelligence and advanced technology. Zara's skin shimmered like a dark amethyst, and her eyes, an almost electric blue, stared at him with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. She was wearing the usual academy uniform, a sleek metallic jumpsuit, but there was something about her presence that made Ethan feel nervous. "Zara? What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice betraying his surprise. He had never spoken much with her outside of class, and it wasn't like her to visit anyone unannounced. I'm sorry. I must have gone to the wrong room," Zara said, her voice smooth, though there was a slight tension in her tone. She paused, glancing around. "I was looking for a study group, and I must have gotten confused. I didn't mean to interrupt." Zara seemed embarrassed, and Ethan, noticing her discomfort, stepped aside to allow her into his room. "It's fine," he said with a small smile. "You're not interrupting anything, just working on some projects." Zara's eyes flickered toward the desk, where Ethan had a variety of alien samples and bio-research notes laid out. She took in the sight of the strange equipment, but her gaze lingered for just a moment longer than usual on one of the vials. It was a mixture of human and alien DNA that Ethan had been studying for a while now. The colors of the liquids inside it were vibrant and strange. "What is this?" Zara asked, stepping closer to the desk. There was a hint of caution in her voice. Ethan hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain. "It's part of a project I'm working on. Nothing important, just some genetic studies." Zara's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. Ethan quickly moved to close the vial, but as he did, he accidentally knocked over a nearby stack of papers. The papers fell to the floor with a soft rustling sound. Ethan bent down to gather them up, but as he reached for the stack, he froze. Zara was still standing near the desk, but her eyes were no longer on the vials. She was staring at him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The shock was clear on her face, and for a split second, he thought she might say something. But she didn't. He quickly stood up and adjusted his posture, awkwardly trying to maintain some composure. "Is there something wrong?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Zara blinked rapidly, breaking out of her trance. "No, I was just surprised," she said softly, her voice losing some of its edge. "I didn't expect to see that." Ethan could feel the tension in the air. He wasn't sure what had caused it, but something about the way Zara was looking at him made him feel exposed. As though she had uncovered a hidden part of himself he wasn't ready to share. "I'm sorry if this was too much," Ethan said, his voice a bit quieter now. He was still standing near the desk, trying to gather his thoughts. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Zara, to her credit, quickly recovered. "No, it's just, I've never seen anyone experiment with human and alien genetics so casually." She paused, looking at him thoughtfully. "You're not worried about what could happen, are you?" Ethan smiled softly, though there was an edge of unease in his expression. "I'm not trying to create anything dangerous. I'm just learning. I want to understand how biology works in different species. I think there's a lot we could learn from one another." Zara nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "I see. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'll leave you to your research." Before she could turn to leave, Ethan quickly spoke up. "Wait, Zara. You don't have to leave. I'm not doing anything special. If you want to talk or hang out, I don't mind." Zara hesitated. There was something in the air now, an unspoken understanding between them. It wasn't just about the research anymore. It was about the connection they were beginning to share. But Zara was different from most of the students at the academy. She was more reserved, more private. Still, the curiosity in her eyes lingered. "I suppose I could stay for a little while," she said, almost to herself. She walked over to a chair by the window, and Ethan noticed how effortlessly graceful she moved. There was a certain calmness about her that made the room feel different, as if the very presence of her changed the atmosphere. Ethan sat down across from her, silently wondering what had brought her here. She wasn't the type to visit someone's room unless there was a reason, but he couldn't figure out what that reason might be. As they sat in silence, Zara spoke again, her voice softer now. "You know, Ethan, you have an interesting perspective on human biology. I've never met someone like you before." Ethan blinked, slightly taken aback by her comment. "Thanks, I guess. I never really thought much about it. It just interests me." Zara studied him for a moment, then smiled, a genuine smile that softened her sharp features. "I think that's what makes you different. You don't look at aliens the way most humans do. You look at them like equals." Ethan couldn't help but feel his heart race a little. Zara had just said something no one had ever said to him before. She wasn't treating him like some oddball. She wasn't looking at him with disdain or discomfort. She was looking at him like an equal. As the moments passed, the initial awkwardness faded, and a strange bond began to form between them. It was subtle at first, but it was there. They both realized that they had more in common than they first thought. They were both outsiders in some way, Zara because of her alien heritage, and Ethan because of his interest in things most humans didn't understand. The days following Zara's visit to Ethan's room felt different. What had started as an accidental encounter had somehow evolved into something more. Ethan found himself thinking about their conversation long after she left, wondering what had sparked the strange connection between them. He had always been fascinated by aliens, but now there was a deeper layer to his curiosity, one that he hadn't expected. Zara was, by far, one of the most intelligent and respected students at the academy. She came from a long line of scholars, in her species, the Veshri, and was known for her cold, analytical mind. She rarely spoke to humans, and yet here she was, engaging with him. Ethan couldn't quite understand why, but it seemed like something was pulling them together. For the next few days, their paths crossed more often than before. It wasn't planned. It was simply fate, or perhaps something more. They saw each other in the cafeteria, during class breaks, and even in the library. Each time they met, the bond between them seemed to grow, though neither of them mentioned it aloud. One afternoon, Ethan was sitting in the library, his face buried in a book about alien genetics. He had been working on his research project for weeks, but there was still so much he needed to understand. He looked up from his book, scanning the rows of shelves, when he saw Zara walking toward him. She was carrying a stack of books, but her eyes were focused on the table where he sat. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, though he didn't know why. "Mind if I join you?" Zara asked, her voice as calm and steady as ever. Ethan smiled and gestured to the seat across from him. "Of course. You're welcome to join me." Zara sat down, placing her books carefully on the table. She glanced at the notes scattered across Ethan's workspace and then back at him. "Still working on that human-alien hybrid project?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. There's still so much to figure out. I've been reading about the biological differences between our species. It's a lot more complicated than I thought." Zara raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure it is. But I've always wondered why humans are so interested in alien biology. Is it just curiosity, or is it something deeper?" Ethan paused, surprised by the question. He hadn't really thought about it that way before. "I think maybe it's because we see aliens as a challenge, something unknown that we want to understand. It's a way to prove that we can adapt, even to things that seem impossible." Zara considered his answer for a moment. "But why do you think humans would want to change themselves to fit in with aliens? Isn't part of what makes humans special your ability to thrive in your own environment?" Ethan thought about her words. "It's not about fitting in, it's about survival. If we could adapt and learn from alien species, maybe we could live in places we never thought possible. Maybe we could become stronger, smarter, more capable." He leaned forward, his voice growing more animated. "Imagine a world where humans aren't limited by our biology, where we can travel to distant planets, explore new galaxies, and even thrive on worlds with conditions that would normally be deadly for us." Zara listened intently, her eyes focused on Ethan as he spoke. There was something in the way he talked about the future, something passionate and hopeful. For a moment, Zara found herself captivated by his vision. She had always been cautious, seeing everything through the lens of logic and reason. But Ethan's dream of a limitless future appealed to something deep inside her. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for his determination. "You really believe that could happen?" she asked, her voice softening. "I have to believe it," Ethan said, his eyes meeting hers. "Because if we don't try, then we'll never know what's possible. And if humans can't push the boundaries, who will?" Zara thought for a moment, then smiled. "I suppose I see your point. But remember, not all knowledge is meant to be pursued. There are risks to everything. Some things might be better left undiscovered." Ethan nodded slowly, realizing there was more to Zara than he had first thought. She wasn't just a brilliant student, she was also cautious, thoughtful, and wise. But he couldn't help but wonder why she was so focused on the risks. Was it because she didn't believe in the potential of humanity? Or was there something more? Before Ethan could ask her, Zara stood up, gathering her books. "I need to get going. I have a meeting with some of the other Veshri students." "Right," Ethan said, his mind still racing from their conversation. "Well, thanks for stopping by. It's always good to have a different perspective." Zara smiled, but there was something unreadable in her expression. "Of course, I'll see you around." As she walked away, Ethan watched her leave, a sense of confusion lingering in his mind. He had never really understood Zara before, but now he felt like there was more to her story than he could see. The next few days were filled with intense research, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between him and Zara. She had been acting differently, her usual reserved nature giving way to small gestures of curiosity. She would ask him questions about his project, sometimes even staying late to help him organize his notes. It was subtle, but Ethan couldn't ignore the growing connection between them. One evening, as the two of them worked late into the night, Zara finally spoke again about the strange experiments Ethan was conducting. She had been reading through his notes and was impressed by his findings, but there was an edge of concern in her voice. "Ethan, you've been studying the alien genome for a while now, but have you thought about the implications of what you're doing? You're not just analyzing the differences between species, you're altering the biology itself." Ethan stopped typing for a moment, looking up at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're changing something fundamental about the way humans are made. What happens if you're wrong? What happens if the changes you make lead to consequences you didn't expect?" Zara's voice was filled with genuine concern. Ethan frowned, unsure how to respond. "I'm not trying to create anything dangerous. I'm just learning. I want to understand how biology works in different species. I thought if I could figure out how to adapt human cells to alien environments, maybe it could be useful." Zara's eyes softened. "I understand your curiosity, but you have to think about the bigger picture. Some things aren't meant to be changed. What if humans weren't meant to survive on other planets? What if your research leads to something we can't control?" Ethan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had thought about the risks, of course, but hearing Zara voice those concerns made him realize how far he had already gone. He wasn't just studying alien biology anymore. He was altering his own genetic code. He was pushing the limits of what it meant to be human. But Zara wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not trying to scare you, Ethan, but if you keep going down this path, you might not like what you find. You have to be careful. Some discoveries are best left untouched." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. He knew she was right. He had been so focused on pushing forward that he hadn't thought about the consequences. What if his research led to something irreversible? What if he changed something so fundamental that there was no going back? "I'll think about it," Ethan said finally, his voice quieter than usual. Zara nodded, but there was something more in her gaze, something that made Ethan wonder if she knew more about the risks than she was letting on. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. It was clear that their connection had deepened, but so had the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As Zara turned to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back at him. "Just be careful, Ethan. I don't want to see you make a mistake you can't fix." Ethan watched her leave, her words echoing in his mind. He had always believed in the potential of his research, but now he wasn't so sure. Was he pushing too hard? Was he on the verge of discovering something dangerous? The days after their last conversation felt heavy on Ethan. Zara's warning had lingered in his mind, a constant reminder that his work was pushing the boundaries of what should be done. He had always known that his research came with risks, but now he wasn't so sure if it was worth it. The more he thought about it, the more the weight of Zara's words made sense. Some things were just better left unknown. Still, Ethan couldn't let go of his curiosity. His project, though risky, held so much potential. If he could find a way to combine the best traits of different species, perhaps humans could become stronger, more adaptable. He could revolutionize the way humanity interacted with the galaxy. But could he really ignore the risks? Late one night, as Ethan worked in his room, he was deep in thought, staring at a vial of liquid that shimmered under the dim light of his desk lamp. This vial contained a mixture of human and alien DNA. It wasn't ready for testing yet, but Ethan had hoped to take the next step soon. He had been testing it on cells for weeks, and so far, the results were promising. The cells had shown signs of adaptation to extreme conditions, something no human could survive without support. But there was more to discover. Much more. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The late hours were starting to wear on him. His mind kept drifting to Zara. What had she meant by, "be careful"? Was she just concerned for him, or did she know something he didn't? Zara had always been smart, and her experience with alien biology was vast. Maybe she understood things about the risks of his work that he hadn't even considered. As he turned back to his notes, there was a knock at the door. Ethan jumped in surprise. It was late, and visitors were rare at this hour. "Come in," he called, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. The door slid open, and to his surprise, Zara stepped inside. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced by something more urgent. There was a sense of determination in her steps as she walked toward him. "Zara? What's wrong?" Ethan asked, standing up from his chair. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice serious. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Zara had never visited him like this before. Her visits had been brief, always professional, but now she seemed different. About what? She glanced around the room, her gaze resting briefly on the vials and papers scattered across his desk. "Your research," she said, her voice low. "I've been thinking about it, and I believe you've gone too far." Ethan frowned, his stomach tightening. He had known this conversation was coming, but hearing Zara say it out loud made it feel more real. "What do you mean? I'm just studying the possibilities. I'm not hurting anyone." "You don't understand," Zara said, her voice rising slightly. "You're not just studying anymore. You've already started experimenting on yourself. You've been changing your own biology, haven't you?" Ethan froze. Zara had hit the nail on the head. He hadn't told her, but somehow she had figured it out. He looked down at his hands, remembering the way they had felt different the last time he had used his experiments. His strength had increased slightly, and his reflexes were sharper. But he hadn't thought it through. He had just been so focused on the results that he didn't consider what he might be becoming. I've been trying to see what's possible," Ethan admitted, his voice quieter now. "I didn't think it would affect me like this." Zara shook her head. "You're becoming something else, Ethan. And I don't think you realize what you're doing. The changes in your cells, they're not reversible. And once they take root, there's no going back." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of her words hit him harder than he expected. The thought of never being able to undo the changes he had made was terrifying. But at the same time, he couldn't help but wonder if it was too late to stop now. He had come so far. How? Could he turn back? "I don't want to stop," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I believe in this. This could change everything for humanity, don't you see? We could be stronger, more adaptable. We could survive anywhere, do anything." Zara took a step closer to him, her eyes searching his face. "And at what cost?" "Ethan, you're not just changing your body, you're changing your humanity. The more you push, the less human you become. Do you really want that?" Her words stung, but they also made him pause. He had always thought of his work as a way to help humanity, to push the limits of what was possible. But now, as Zara's words echoed in his mind, he began to wonder if he had been blinded by ambition. Was he really trying to help humans, or was he just trying to prove something to himself? Zara sighed, sitting down in the chair across from him. "I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to understand the risks. There are things out there in the galaxy that we can't control. And once you start playing with biology on this level, you might create something you can't stop." Ethan sat down, staring at his hands. His mind raced, but he couldn't find an answer. His research had always felt like it was on the edge of something great, something that could change the world. But now he wasn't so sure. The thought of becoming something else, something that might not even be human anymore, made him question everything. "What should I do?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. "If I stop now, all this work will be for nothing. But if I keep going, I might lose myself." Zara was silent for a long moment before speaking again. "You have to decide what kind of person you want to be, Ethan. Do you want to keep pushing no matter what it costs? Or do you want to find a way to live with what you've already done?" Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never felt so conflicted in his life. The pressure to succeed had always been there, but now it felt different. Now it wasn't just about proving himself. It was about who he was becoming. He had always been human. What if that changed? "I don't know," he said softly. "I just don't know anymore." Zara stood up, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you decide, just remember there's more to life than ambition. Don't let your research consume you. If you do, you might lose more than just your humanity." As Zara turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Think carefully, Ethan. I'm not saying you should stop, but you need to be aware of the consequences." The door slid shut behind her, and Ethan was left alone in his room, surrounded by the evidence of his work. The vials, the notes, the research, everything he had poured his energy into for so long. But now it all felt different. It felt dangerous. He sat in the chair for a long time, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and doubts. What if Zara was right? What if the changes he had already made were irreversible? What if he was no longer the person he used to be? Ethan stood at the edge of his desk, staring at the array of research he had accumulated over the past few months. His mind was a whirlpool of conflicting thoughts, all circling back to the same question. What had he become? Zara's words had haunted him ever since their last conversation. "You're changing your humanity." Her warning echoed in his mind, louder than the quiet hum of the spaceship. But what did that really mean? Was he truly giving up what made him human, or was he simply evolving into something better, something more capable of surviving in the galaxy, where danger lurked at every corner? He had always believed that progress required risk. After all, it was only by challenging the boundaries of what was possible that humanity could grow. But now, with Zara's concern hanging over him like a shadow, he was beginning to question everything he had worked for. Was the future he envisioned one worth pursuing at the cost of losing himself? The door to his room slid open, interrupting his thoughts. Ethan turned to see Zara standing in the doorway. This time, her expression was different. There was no judgment in her eyes, no anger or concern. Instead, there was a quiet understanding. "I thought you might be here," she said softly, stepping inside. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on Ethan. "You've been avoiding me." Ethan didn't speak at first. Instead, he reached for a vial on his desk, swirling it gently. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the risks." Zara nodded, walking closer. "And I'm not sure anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I've gone too far, but I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to undo what I've already done." Zara stopped in front of him, her expression gentle but serious. "Ethan, you're not alone in this. You don't have to carry the weight of your decisions by yourself." He met her gaze, feeling a strange warmth spread through him. In all his years of studying alien biology, he had never realized how much the connections between people mattered. He had been so focused on the science, so intent on proving humanity's place in the universe, that he had overlooked the importance of trust and companionship. "I don't want to lose myself," Ethan said, his voice shaky. "I thought I was helping humans by doing this, but now I don't know what I'm becoming." Zara reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're still human, Ethan, but you have to decide what kind of future you want. You can't keep running forward without thinking about where you're going. Sometimes you need to take a step back. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. But if I stop now, everything I've worked for will be wasted. All the knowledge, all the progress, it will be for nothing, Zara sighed, lowering her hand. It's not about wasting your work. It's about choosing what's worth continuing. If you keep going down this path, you might end up losing everything. Not just your humanity, but the things that matter to you. The people you care about. Ethan's heart tightened. He had never really thought about the consequences of his actions on others. He had been so focused on the pursuit of knowledge that he hadn't realized how much it had isolated him from the rest of the world. He had pushed people away, even Zara, who had become the only person who seemed to understand the weight of his work. "Do you think it's too late?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "Is it too late to stop?" Zara paused, her expression softening. "I don't think it's too late. But you have to be honest with yourself. You have to decide what you really want out of this. And if the risks are worth it." Ethan looked down at his hands, his mind racing. The changes in his body had already begun to take root. He could feel it in the way his muscles responded to even the slightest movements, in the way his mind processed information with greater clarity. But the more he felt those changes, the more he feared losing something essential. The deeper he went into his research, the more disconnected he felt from the world he used to know. "I don't want to be a monster," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "I don't want to lose myself." Zara stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. "You're not a monster, Ethan. You're just someone who's trying to make sense of the world. But you can't do that alone. You have to trust others. You have to trust me." Ethan's eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable. "I don't know if I can stop." Zara gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Then we'll figure it out together. I'm not going to let you do this on your own." Her words were a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge he had been teetering on. For the first time in what felt like ages, Ethan allowed himself to believe that there might be hope, that there might be a way forward without losing everything he had worked for. Zara's presence was a comfort, but it also reminded him of the reality of the situation. He couldn't go back to where he was before. He couldn't erase what he had already done, but maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to move forward without destroying everything he had once believed in. As the days passed, Ethan found himself reflecting more deeply on his choices. He continued his research, but now he took a more cautious approach. He focused on the parts of his work that could bring humanity closer to understanding alien biology without pushing the limits of what was safe. It wasn't easy. The temptation to push further, to break through the boundaries, still called to him, but he resisted. Zara continued to support him, helping him navigate the complexities of his research without losing sight of the bigger picture. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Ethan felt the urge to push forward, to take one more step. But Zara's steady presence reminded him to think carefully before making any decisions. It wasn't long before a new discovery emerged, one that neither of them had expected. While analyzing a sample of alien DNA, Ethan noticed something unusual. The cells reacted to a certain chemical in a way that he had never seen before. It was a subtle change, a small shift in the structure, but it was enough to make Ethan pause. This wasn't just another experiment. This was something new. "What is this?" Ethan muttered to himself, staring at the screen. He leaned closer, examining the data. "This could change everything." Zara stepped over to his desk, peering at the results. "What are you seeing?" Ethan's voice was filled with awe. "It's a reaction that I've never seen before. It's like the cells are adapting, but in a way that's completely different from what I expected. It's almost like they're evolving on their own. Zara's eyes widened. You think it could be the next step? Something that could allow humans to adapt more easily to alien environments? Ethan nodded, his excitement growing. Yes, but it's not just about surviving in new environments. This could be the key to understanding how to make ourselves more adaptable, more resilient. This could be the breakthrough I've been searching for. Zara watched him, her expression thoughtful. It's a big discovery, but you have to be careful. If you continue down this path, you might uncover more than you're prepared to handle. Ethan nodded slowly, his excitement tempered by the reality of Zara's words. I know, but I think this is something worth pursuing. Maybe this is the answer I've been looking for all along. Zara didn't argue. She knew that Ethan had come too far to turn back now, but she also knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more risks, more questions, and more challenges. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt that he was on the right path. Whatever the future held, he was ready to face it, with Zara by his side. The days that followed were some of the most intense and challenging that Ethan had ever experienced. After his discovery, things had changed. He had felt a renewed sense of purpose, a drive to push forward. Yet he was still haunted by the question of whether it was worth the risk. The discovery he had made, the reaction of the alien cells, had shown potential beyond anything he had imagined. But with that potential came a new set of challenges, and those challenges made him question everything. He had been working day and night, analyzing the results, but the weight of Zara's words lingered. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Her warning had stuck with him, reminding him that no matter how far he went in his research, he had to retain control. He had to remember who he was and who he wanted to be. Zara had been there with him through it all. She helped him when things got too overwhelming, keeping him grounded when the temptation to push further became too strong. She was always there to remind him that there was more at stake than just his research. He had a responsibility, not just to himself, but to those around him. But there was something else Zara had taught him too. She had shown him that his discovery wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a chance to help others, to improve the future for everyone, not just himself. Ethan's eyes darted to the screen in front of him. The data was clearer now, and he could see patterns emerging in the alien cells that he hadn't expected. They were adapting faster than ever before, and for a moment he allowed himself to believe that he might have found the key to unlocking humanity's potential. A part of him couldn't wait to share his findings with the rest of the Academy, but the other part of him still hesitated. What if it was too dangerous? What if he was making a mistake? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was late, and visitors at this hour were rare. Ethan turned toward the door, expecting to see Zara, but when the door slid open, he found someone else standing there. A tall figure, cloaked in shadows, stepped into the room. Ethan, the figure said, its voice deep and commanding. We need to talk. Ethan froze. He recognized the voice immediately. It was Varen, the head of the alien council that governed the Academy. Varen was a Veshri, like Zara, but he was different. Stern, rigid, and authoritative. He had always kept his distance from Ethan, treating him like just another student. But now, standing in front of him, Varen's presence was overwhelming. What do you want? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he could feel his heart racing. Varen stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I know what you've been working on, Ethan. The genetic alterations, the experiments. We've been watching you. Ethan's mind raced. He had kept his work private, had done everything he could to keep it under the radar. How had they found out? Was this the end of everything he had worked for? What do you mean? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. The council is aware of your research, Varen said, his voice cold. And we believe it's time to address the consequences of your actions. Ethan's pulse quickened. What consequences? I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just studying. I'm trying to understand alien biology. Varen shook his head. You're not just studying. You're altering the very nature of your species. You're playing with powers you don't fully understand. The Council believes that your research could lead to something uncontrollable. Something dangerous. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had feared this moment, but now that it had arrived, he wasn't sure what to do. I'm not trying to create anything dangerous. I just want to help. I want to give humanity the ability to adapt and survive. Varen's expression remained unchanged. And that is why we must stop you. The Academy cannot allow this kind of research to continue. You're too close to something that could be disastrous. Ethan's mind whirled. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let everything he had worked for be erased just because someone else was afraid of the unknown. You can't just shut it down, Ethan said, his voice rising. This is the future. You don't understand the potential. This could change everything for humanity. We could thrive in places we never thought possible. We could become something more. Varen's eyes narrowed. And what if you're wrong? What if your research leads to something we can't control? What if you unleash a force that we can't stop? You need to understand the risk of what you're doing. We cannot allow you to continue. Ethan felt a wave of frustration and fear wash over him. He had worked so hard, spent so many sleepless nights pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and now, in a single moment, it was all being threatened. He had never considered the possibility that his work might be seen as a threat. To him, it was progress. It was the key to humanity's future. I'm not going to stop, Ethan said, his voice firm. I've come too far. I won't let anyone tell me what I can and can't do. Varen's gaze was sharp, and for a moment, it seemed like he might say something more. But instead, he stood still, studying Ethan. Very well. But know this, Ethan. If you continue, there will be consequences. You won't be able to hide from them forever. With those final words, Varen turned and left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavier than ever before. He had come so far, and yet now he had to decide whether he was willing to risk everything for the future he believed in. But just as the doubts began to settle in, there was a knock at the door. This time, Ethan didn't hesitate. He opened it to find Zara standing there, her eyes filled with concern. "Ethan, are you okay?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ethan closed the door behind her, his mind still, racing. "No, I'm not okay," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "The council knows about my research. They want me to stop." Zara's expression softened. "I knew this would happen. They don't understand what you're trying to do. But you can't let them control you." "I don't know what to do anymore," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "I'm caught between wanting to push forward and the fear of what could happen if I keep going." Zara stepped closer, her hand gently resting on his arm. "Ethan, you've already made the decision. You've come this far. You can't let fear stop you now." Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. She was right. He had come this far, and no matter what the council said, he couldn't let them dictate his future. He couldn't let fear hold him back. His discovery was too important, and if he didn't follow through, then what was the point of everything he had done? "You're right," he said, his voice stronger now. "I can't stop. Not now. But I need your help. I can't do this alone." Zara smiled, her eyes warm with trust. "You never have been alone, Ethan. We're in this together." With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan turned back to his desk, ready to continue his work. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. He had made his choice, and he was going to see it through. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, no matter how difficult they might be. The future was still uncertain, but Ethan was no longer afraid to take the first step.